Larry Hughes is going to pop out and get the ball. Jordan's going to rub his man off of Leitner and then cut down the center and gets a nice pass from Larry Hughes.
Long rebound, Hughes. Fake, jumper is good. Give it to me, Larry. Give it to me, Larry Hughes.
Welcome into this week's Believe in Wizards podcast. We got another fun episode for you here today. I think you guys are going to like who I have joining me on this one. I will admit in advance, I do have a little bit of a cold, so sorry if you got to listen to me sniffle through this one a little bit, but always not ideal to have to do one of these shows directly after a tough loss, which the Wizards experienced against the Hornets last night, but we'll power through. Still got some really good content for you. We're going to try to keep it upbeat and positive, so stick with us for that. As always, please leave us a review. If you like what you're hearing, leave us a 5-star review. That's always appreciated. More importantly, tell a friend. I'm trying to build a little community here. So we'll take all the interaction we can get. Hit us up on social media at Believe in Wizards, all that good stuff. And just let us know what you want to hear. Any questions you have, things you want to hear us talk about on the show. We'd love to hear that. But first, let's just get an ad read out of the way here. Let's hear from BetOnline to start us off. We're back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football betting action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BELIEVE50 to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, with that, let's get to the actual episode. Okay, welcome into Believe in Wizards. Got the band back together here. I'm joined by my co-host, Larry Hughes. Larry, first time we're doing this season. Glad we could make some schedules work here a little bit. And we've obviously got some great stuff to talk about. This is the first time we've done this show together when the Wizards are like objectively good. So this is a fun one.
I know that's right, man. And everything is lining up. You got fans in the building. You got the excitement. The team's playing well, so you get more eyeballs that are actually in the building that can go out and tell everybody how great the Wizards are playing. And they don't, not just the people that are watching, on their phones or on TV. So I think that's a plus, when a team is playing well and you got those, those bodies in the building. It's creating a perfect storm right now.
We're starting to see like that national media tilt kind of change a little bit to like, oh, they got off to a fluky start. And now it's like, well, hey, like this is enough sample size that we have to respect what they've done so far. And it's been at least 5 or 6 years, I feel like, since we've heard that about a Wizards team.
Yeah, just on the outside. I mean, the leadership is solid. The leadership is solid from top to bottom. I mean, when I say top, that's the front office and Shep and those guys. But also, what Wes has been able to do. I mean, you have to relate some of that to him. Yeah. His presence, his demeanor, his connectability to the team. Like he's been, in the NBA for a long time. As a fan, as a coach. So yeah, I think a lot of that stuff is working because the group that's formed are real leaders.
And you talked, about what he was like when he was there while you were in DC too, and his demeanor. And I think that's really been perfect for this group of guys. Like he's a calm, sort of steadying influence. And when they start out, like in the Pelicans game, they were all over the place and kind of spazzy and just jacking up shots. And he said he called an early timeout and just calmly just said, like, guys, like, hey, come on. And then at halftime in the locker room, they said he didn't raise his voice. He just showed him a few clips and was like, I think we all know we can do better than this. And they ended up winning that game and coming back from 19 down. So I think that's, something to be said about him and just approaching this group of guys the right way.
Yeah, I think you respect that. I think you respect that because there's a lot of things that go on in the NBA game. There's a lot of things that go on inside of the players' heads. I mean, we all want to accomplish our goals. We all want to be successful. So when you got a guy that's leading in that manner, nice, calm, you guys know what to do. I'm just going to keep you in line. It brings confidence to the guys. Like, hey, we can do this. Coach is there to support us. But essentially, he's looking at us to do it for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good combination. I've always loved Wes, as a person, as a coach, and he spent a lot of time around different players, from top players to guys that are fringe players that are trying to make it to the league. Being that voice as an assistant versus being a head coach, of hearing all of those comments that players talk about during the games, in the locker room. Coach was tripping in the locker room, so our second half was terrible. Like, he's experienced a lot of that. So I think you have to equate a lot of that to just NBA experience.
You hear a lot about in college basketball where players more typically have like an assistant coach's ear than the head coach. Is that similar in the NBA, where like you're more likely to have a closer sort of one-on-one relationship with a particular assistant coach or somebody like that?
I think so, because you identify, the coach that best fits, who you are as a person. You can't always run and have a conversation with the head coach, because the head coach is responsible for, the 15 guys that are, trying to make this thing go. So a lot of times you do find an assistant. My assistant I can speak to in Cleveland was Mike Malone. Mike Malone was a guy that I went to. We had conversations about things that I didn't necessarily want the head coach to know, or how I was feeling about certain plays or things of that nature. So you definitely find that assistant, and players remember those assistants, because a lot of times those guys become the head coach. Wes, Mike Malone, those guys do it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you hit on the front office piece of this year. And for anybody that hasn't heard yet, Tommy Shepard was given a multi-year extension. We haven't sort of heard more details about, how many years and things like that, but also a promotion from just GM to now president and GM. I'm not really sure, to be honest, what exactly changes in that situation. It said he would be responsible for all basketball related moves as it relates to the Wizards, Mystics, Go-Go, and Wizards DG, the esports team there, the NBA 2K team. So I thought that was the case before, or at the very least, all those people leaned heavily on him. So, whether it's just a title and some money and more years, whatever, he deserves, I think, the credit for putting this team together. And you're starting to hear other, GMs and people around the league, national media, talk about how like that trade might go down as one of the best trades in the last several years, just how complicated it was, what it allowed them to do, all the players they brought in, and obviously the impact it's having on the court. Larry, I know Tommy Shepard personally. Like, what does that mean, to you, to hear that he's going to be in DC for a long time?
For me, it says trust. I mean, that's the word that I think about when these organizations put someone in that president role and also that general manager role, because why they've been separate all of these years is because those guys needed someone to bounce information off of. There was checks and balances there. If one guy got, off the rails, then the other guy was there, or the other person was there to have those conversations to get things back in order. But when you title, president and general manager, that tells me that they trust you. That tells me that they trust, your vision, that you're going to stay on track. Tommy has a great history in the NBA, so that stuff speaks for itself. But that's what that speaks to me, is that they trust Tommy's vision and the things that he's been able to accomplish, in the trade and, the free agency trade space, all of this money, and these deals are getting tougher to move. And you find a way to move one deal, but to then move two deals that were thought to be unmovable. Yeah. I mean, I got to trust your brain power and your team that you're building around you to say, hey, it's your show. We trust you and give us a winner. And I think that's what those guys did.
I wouldn't say that this organization has been great about making moves that the fan base is going to respond well to, all the time. But I would say the reaction to the Shepard extension has been like overwhelmingly positive so far. And, DC fans can be tough. Like, if you haven't shown them enough, they're not shy about telling you. And I think that, that I would say 90+% of what I've seen has been like a thumbs up. It says a lot about just, what he's done already.
Yeah, man, you got to create that positive history, because anytime that a fan can remember back and it's not a positive situation, it usually triggers like, okay, here we go again. So I think that these guys, with this team that they put around them, can start to build that, that good equity in making smart decisions and doing things that can push the organization forward and also give the fans a lot to cheer for. Fans got to roll with that. Fans have to be excited about, a team coming in and wanting to give them a product that they can be, they can gravitate towards. So I think that that's a really good positive situation.
Yeah, I mean, we've already moved past the early days of like, oh, he's Ernie Jr., he only likes European prospect, like all that stuff. He took kind of a bad rap before people, I think, fully gave him a chance. And I'm glad that, we've settled into a nice position here. The one thing I would implore folks is they're probably not going to continue at this pace all season, no matter how good they are. It's tough to win 2/3 of your games. So let's remember how good we feel about him and the moves now, halfway through the year, if they're, only a little above 500 or whatever the case may be.
And I think too, Matt, you got to think about this is a lot of teams in this league will struggle.
Yeah, sure.
And, you have to be able to attack those situations when teams are struggling or undermanned. Mm-hmm. So there's a balance of, what we do versus what everybody else is doing and how they're coming, whether it's a road game or a home game, and how that other team is coming to play. So, if you do it right, that can get you another 10 wins out of a season, just because, you take advantage of those situations.
Yeah, that's actually like a perfect segue for what I wanted to ask you about next, Larry. So last night they lost to the Hornets. Tonight they play the Miami Heat. And I have not seen the injury report for the Heat game yet, but I know that Lowry and Bam Adebayo did not play for Miami last night. So Spencer Dinwiddie will not play tonight, second game of a back-to-back. I almost kind of thought that they would have sat him last night against the Hornets and, tried to win that game without him there, and then had him fresh to take that Heat game and maybe best position yourself to take both games. But they obviously lost last night too. So to your point, like you got to capitalize on beating the teams when they don't have players. So I don't know, maybe they thought with those guys out, Miami would be easier to beat than a Charlotte team at home that's mostly sort of fully staffed, I guess.
And I think that is strategy. And the thing about strategy is you don't necessarily know if it works until you do it over time. So I think that that's, part of the process. It's a tough combination to figure out, if a person is that back-to-back person, mm-hmm. which one of those games is going to make the most sense for them to sit out? Yeah. Because sometimes it matters like to what happened, a couple of days before. Mm-hmm. So that's a really good comment, and things that you have to think about in the strategy, watching injury reports, watching, matchups and things of that nature. I mean, that's why they pay those guys all of that money to figure those things out.
Yeah, absolutely. Just sticking with Dinwiddie here for a second, he's talked a lot about he's intentionally sacrificing on offense to be the table setter for all these other guys. And, he doesn't want to take 15 shots because that might mean Harrell goes from 10 shots to 8 shots, or Kuzma goes from 11 to 9 and things like that. But, I do think they need him to be a little bit more aggressive. He went 0 for 5 last night. 4 of those were like sort of tough threes that he didn't really miss close on a couple of them. In 10 games with Beal, he's averaging 12 points, 5 assists, 4.5 rebounds. In the 3 games without Beal, he's averaging 28 points, 8 rebounds, 7.5, or 8 assists and 7.5 rebounds. So to me, Larry, there's got to be some kind of sweet spot in the middle there. Like, just because Beal and everybody else is there doesn't mean you only need to take like 5 shots in a game, especially in a game where everybody else is struggling offensively. Like, they were pretty terrible last night, and they could have used him to post up Devontae Graham or have, exploit a matchup. And he chose to settle for jump shots. I don't know. What have you seen from him? And do you think he's being maybe like overly passive?
Well, I think that's a good mindset to have. A decent mindset to have is that you want to make sure that your play, how you play the game, is better for your teammates, to make sure that they are put in the best position to be successful. And as a PG, that's what we expect a point guard to do. The game has changed. Obviously, everybody has to be a threat. Everybody has to be a ball handler, and somewhat of a playmaker. So I think that he has the right mentality and the right mindset that's going to make his teammates gravitate towards him and appreciate him even more. Now, how you figure out how that factors into the game is about your film session, is about your coaches, but his mindset is right. His mindset is we have a really good team, and we have guys that need the basketball to be successful. I'm a ball handler, so really at any given time, I could get a shot off and, do what I need to do or do what I want to do with the basketball. So I think he's in the right mindset. I just think, again, it's one of those overtime things. He's a guy on a new team coming back from injury. Obviously, though he wants to make sure his teammates get the ball, he wouldn't want to press the entire season because he's just coming off an injury. So he's going to want to utilize his teammates. So I understand. I like his game. And I think he has to, like I said, just watch that film, see how his teammates are getting the ball, see where he can be effective, see where he can be aggressive. But overall, I like his mindset of making sure that since he has the basketball, he has to make sure that everyone else can accomplish their goals to help their team win.
I totally agree with you. And I think overall that's the approach like this group of guys needs when you're that deep. But can you talk a little bit, Larry? Like sometimes guys are almost too unselfish to the point where like, as a teammate, you're like kind of annoyed that a guy isn't taking certain shots or isn't exploiting a matchup. Like, can you walk us through what that other end of things is like?
It's a balance. It is a balance. You have a bunch of new guys that have come from different situations and different teams and different sort of way that the organizations or the teams do things. You have talkers that'll chirp in the locker room about this guy taking too many shots. But I think when you have a guy that's, has the ability, has the talent that he has, you're not in the situation or a team where you have this quote unquote big three. Like right. The Wizards have a good team. They don't have to rely on, this new thing of having a big three to be successful. So with that, I think it's a learning process. I would say his teammates sitting next to him and say, hey, man, you can take more shots, but I appreciate what you're doing, for the team to try to help everybody out. It's when you have the basketball and you have control, it's better to have a teammate say, hey, take more shots than have that. Hey, man, pass the damn ball. You know what I'm saying? So take more shots, you have better conversation and better, team accomplishment.
Obviously we're not in the locker rooms. We don't really know, but this does seem like a group where like they have good chemistry already. And just the way you hear guys talk about each other, like, I don't think they can all be faking it. So I do think somebody like Brad or Montrezl Harrell could go up to Dinwiddie and say like, hey man, you can't go 0 for 5 in a game like this. Like we need you to be even 0 for 10 is better for the team because at least, you're putting a little pressure on the defense. Last night they were ahead for the first half pretty much and into the third quarter. And then the third quarter might've been like the worst quarter they've played all season. The Hornets switched to a zone, dared them to just shoot threes. And the Wizards ended up going 8 of 42 for the night, which is 19%. And Wes Unseld talked after the game about how like he told them beforehand that would happen, to expect teams to go into zone. They talked a lot about during morning shoot around. And he liked most of the looks they got. They just didn't make them. So he told them to calm down and get accustomed to seeing it because more and more teams are going to do it. Larry, like the fan reaction last night was, why are we shooting so many threes? Like get into the paint. But can you talk a little bit about like what it's like sometimes like, hey, I know I'm a good shooter and I have open looks. Like it, I can knock this down and you're confident in your game. Like how hard that is sometimes to not just sort of like take a few of those shots.
Man, we're professional basketball players. Scoring the basketball and playing basketball is what we do. So at any given time, if somebody challenges you to take a shot and they're going to leave you wide open or leave you open and they're going to dare you, you can't dare a professional basketball player to take any shot. They're going to take it. And I think with the rhythm, if you make those shots, then you force the defense to do something different. Then they can't, force you to take those shots. But it's all about making shots. It's all about making shots. I think ball movement is key. And that team is a really good team. Charlotte's a really good team to play zone defense because they're young and they're active and they're going to fly around on defense. They're not going to waste rotation. So other teams that play zone may not look like Charlotte, because of how active they are. But yeah, I think if you challenge, an NBA player, and obviously they're pretty good shooters, they're going to take those shots, and you want to see a better result. But as a coach, you're going to still say, "Hey, we can get a better one," but keep taking those shots.
You had Gafford like feasting inside for most of this game. He had his best game of the season. I'm going to say he had 21 and 8 on like 9 and 12 shooting. Harrell was pretty effective when he actually got touches. Like, how do you balance that? Like, yeah, we want to take these shots because we think we can make them, and they're open threes, which is always a good thing to get. But we still have to like exploit a mismatch downside, like inside too. How do you kind of juggle those two mindsets, I guess?
I would say playing the game. I would say playing the game. And again, when you're making shots, everything is great. And when you're missing shots, now it's time you find, an alternative to put the basketball in the hole. And as a team, you have to figure that out. Like you're not going to tell those guys to stop shooting, because that's the nature of the game now. I mean, a lot of teams are going to trade, threes for twos. So they're going to shoot the basketball, and you're going to encourage them to shoot the basketball. But what you're saying is identify when those shots aren't going in. To change the game up, you got to get to the free throw line. To change the game up, you have to drive the basketball. So those are the things that you have to do within the game and play the game within the game to, not allow yourself to, get caught down that rabbit hole of just shooting threes the entire game. That's a lot of threes.
It's a lot. 42 is a lot, man, especially when you're basically ice cold. And they never seem to play well in that building for whatever reason. I think they've lost 8 or 9 straight in Charlotte. So it's like there's some sort of jinx there. I don't know if it's the rims or it's drafty or what's going on.
I heard it was the MJ curse.
There you go. Exactly.
it was how the Wizards did MJ. I heard they could never win in that building.
I definitely think there's something going on there, man. They are 25th in 3-point percentage on the season, which is not great. Actually, I think that they were 25th before last night. So that might have actually even gone down. But they've been pretty good about, like you said, about finding other ways. Brad getting to the rim and things like that. Beal did sort of have like a bounce back game. He hasn't shot as well, normally so far. There's been a lot of talk about why teams are shooting so poorly. Larry, were you in the league the last time they switched the ball? And if so, can you talk about what a difference that actually makes for players?
You know what? It is a difference. It is a difference. And I think as professional players, I don't think we want to come off as we're complaining about the equipment, but it's like anything. I mean, if you're a surgeon and some new equipment comes out and now you have to use this new piece of tech, you're going to be a little uncomfortable. It's not, you're not going to hit all the marks that you would hit, as a surgeon with the tools that you were using before. And that's exactly what it is. I mean, from a basketball standpoint, just having the feel of the ball, knowing where the seams are. I mean, those things factor in. And I haven't messed around with the new Wilson ball, so I don't know how it seams up, versus a Spalding ball. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was in when they tried to change it to this synthetic sort of material basketball that
did not go well.
It did not go well. And thank God that Steve Nash was who Steve Nash was at the time, because we were all complaining about the ball cutting up our fingertips. But Steve Nash was like the main guy that the league really listened to, because obviously he was a ball handler and who he was, that we were able to start those conversations. But yes, the ball made a huge difference. It didn't feel the same. It hit the rim. It didn't bounce the same. It didn't feel like it bounced the same.
Yeah, sure.
So I think it's a difference. And I think I wouldn't say it's a huge difference, but I think us as players, we know the difference, and it will throw you off.
And I think it's sort of like a mental perfect storm for some of these guys too. Like we've had a couple short off seasons, so maybe people, you know what I mean? Like it's that might be part of the slow start. You've got the new ball, and then we've talked so much about how like it's a confidence game. So you miss a couple, maybe you attribute it to the ball and things like that. Then you miss a couple more. Like things like that seem like they can snowball, I guess, from an observer perspective. Is that reasonable?
I think it's the feel. I think it's the feel, man. I mean, I know, many NBA players can catch the basketball from three, shoot the basketball with their eyes closed and get close to the rim. Mm-hmm. It's because they have a feel of where the basket is, but they also have a feel of the basketball. And for me, you can't, exclude the fact that when you have a feeling of something, there's a comfort level there. And I think like now guys, coming back from these shortened seasons, they're in pretty good shape. So they have legs. And then I guess you can add in the new rule change.
Sure.
Is a problem because those field goals that were misses were last year, they were actually free throws or taking the basketball out on the side. So those missed shots, some of these missed shots that are going up could be fouls that were fouls, last year are now going into the bucket as missed shots.
As someone who played in a more physical era and actually liked to play defense, how much have you enjoyed just seeing the sort of difference in this year's style of play?
I like it. I like it. I think they're on the right track. I think there's some things that they have to work out with kind of the referee's discretion or kind of their, the human nature of refereeing some of these. I wouldn't even say they're 50-50 calls, but some of these marginal calls. But I love the fact that they're allowing the defender to own his space, to be physical within his space, and to operate with technique. I was always taught you can be as physical as you want to be as long as you do it with technique. And I rely on that. And I was just, from watching the game, a number of years, like that wasn't true anymore. So I'm loving the fact that, you can be physical. If you beat the guy to the spot, you can bump into that guy. So that's just, all about technique now.
As a fan, like I don't ever need to see like a playoff game that's like 70-65 as the final score again, but I also don't need to see 145 to 142 as the final score. So the fact that they're like somewhere in the middle at least shows me that they're like trying to listen to what the fan base is telling them.
Yeah, you know what it does? It forces the guy to take better shots. Mm-hmm. Like it forces you to, when you don't have that, trying to create that advantage, to take a bad shot or to try to force something that you don't have, because now you're not rewarded for that. So it prompts for a better team game. It prompts for better ball movement. And I think it makes you take better shots.
I think that's been like sort of perfect timing for this Wizards team too. You got long guys that want to be physical, and you've got a coach that wants to preach those things and teach, defensive technique. You had Raul Neto say the other night, I'm not saying we play the best defense all the time, but we care all the time. And he just kept hammering on like, this team is going to put in effort defensively. And maybe it wasn't always the case the last couple seasons, at least. Yeah,
well, I know you got one guy that's going to call you out on your effort, and that's Montrez. So if he's getting time, if he's seeing the court, if he is, he's not the best defender, but he sticks his nose in there and he tries, and he'll accept accountability, because I've seen him and teammates kind of talk and point things out. So when you have guys that'll hold you accountable and you want to play defense and you want to stick your nose in there, knowing that the advantage is not always going to be to the offensive player. Like as a coach now, as a head coach now, I can start to really hold our guys accountable for not playing defense, not being in the right spot. Because again, now, if you do it with technique, you can be as physical as you want to be. So let's figure out, who has the best technique and who actually wants to go out there and play defense. Because it sounds crazy and it's very, very old, but defense wins championships. And I think that's, has to be a component of what good teams have to do.
That's what this team is going to have to hang their hat on, which is not a thing I ever thought I would say about a Wizards team, in the last decade. But they're like 19th, I think, in offensive rating right now, and right around 5th or 6th in defensive rating. I have not checked this morning to see, what last night's, game did to the numbers. But that's their calling card so far. And one of the major focal points for that defense has been the play of sophomore Deni Avdija. He's got a defensive rating of 93.6, which is 6th best in the NBA. And Larry, do you want to take a guess for what he credits for his big improvement this year?
Oh, it has to be film.
Yeah.
It has to be film, because I had questions about Deni's, defensive ability. But I thought with watching film that could put him in the right position. Even if he was a little slower foot, if you start in the right position, then you do yourself a pretty good, you do yourself some justice, because now you're not out of position. And I think that that's been key for him. And then once people start to talk about you being a defensive player, that kicks you in even more. I mean, that adds even more fuel to your fire, and makes you want to be even more of a better defender. So I think along with him putting in the work, but also him being recognized for putting in that work, is only going to help him keep moving forward.
Can you talk about like what the reputation is like between referees? Like if you're known as a defender, do you get a little more leeway for stuff?
I know back, when I was playing, obviously, we had conversations with the refs, before games, even during games, and obviously sometimes after games, depending on how the game went.
Sure.
But you kind of start to plant those seeds, with refs, like before games, or, they watch film as well. So they know things that you do. They know some of your tactics as well. So you can have those conversations with the refs and start to talk to them about, hey, when I get in the paint, I like to use my hands, or be mindful. My hands are quick. That's what I would always tell the refs. I got fast hands. So sometimes you may think that I tapped someone. I didn't really tap them, but I
plant the seed early.
Yeah, I plant the seed. I have fast hands, or, I take charges. So, watch, even if I'm guarding the big guy gets it, just watch my feet, make sure I'm in the right position. So those things as a vet, I learned those things over time, but those are the conversations that you would have to plant those seeds to let the refs know that, hey, we're out here to play defense. And then you would kind of mention, hey, man, hey, we top 5 here. We're top 5 in the league. So that can give you some leeway because, again, refs are human as well.
Wes Unseld said that he talked about the film, but he said, I'm not exaggerating. Before I came out here, he was knocking on the coach's office door and was asking to watch additional film, which he does quite often, which, we talked about this last year, like guys needing to take that on themselves. And it can't just be like the coach is forcing you to watch film. Like you got to want to do that. And from Hoop District, friend of the show, Neil Dalal, asked Denny Avdia about how much game film he actually watches. And he says, more than I watch Netflix, which I thought was a great line. Obviously, like that's a cool thing to say. I watched film, so I got better. But can you walk us through like how that actually manifests into playing better defense? Like, what do you learn from those things? Like, what's he doing differently this year that's like made him take such a big leap?
Well, I think how you can, that he's watching film by the amount of chatter of how, good he's gotten since last year, with his defensive abilities. So that there's proof there. If he says he's watching film and you saw, the jump in his defensive game or his offensive game or just his game in general, then you'll know that he's locked in. He's not lying. He's not bullshitting about, what he thinks about who he can be or how he can help the team. So if I'm watching film and then I start to see some results on the court, my teammates are clapping me up, patting me on the back, good job, way to rotate. Well, I visualized, I knew that was coming. I knew it was time for me to rotate because I watched the film and I watched these plays happening. So I knew it was time for me to move, once the game started. So I think once you see some results on your own and then you start to get those comments from your teammates, and then once the media kicks in and starts to write about it, then that's going to make you lock in even more. So I think film is a huge part of that. And a lot of young guys, they don't know how to watch film. They'll just end up watching the game. So if you find a guy that's actually made those adjustments, and he's made adjustments, like I wasn't sure about his feet, last year. So he's made those adjustments, and that, probably is a testament to watching film. So if you see results, then a guy's not just watching the tape, watching the game just to watch the game. He's watching it to break down where he needs to be on the court. And that is something that'll keep that guy around for, 10, 15 years in the league.
Is that better positioning, less use of hands, understanding what is or isn't a foul in this league versus the league he's used to, all of the above? Like anything I'm missing on the list there of stuff that might kind of show up?
I think it's all of the above, because you not only watch your tendencies and what you tend to do. If a play goes away from you, do you stand up? Do you turn your head? Do you get disengaged because the ball is now going away from you? Or, but also you get a chance to watch the other players' tendencies, like who you're guarding, or, different players around the league and like what they like to do. Like some guys will only, even if they're right-handed, they will only dribble the ball twice with their right hand before they decide to come back, to their left hand. And as a defender, we're like, oh, you can't let this guy go right. So on his second dribble, you're rushing to take him out. But he's only going to dribble twice with his right hand, so he's coming back to you. Mm-hmm. And if you watch enough film, like you don't go rushing over to his right hand because you know that he's coming back to his left. So that is an example of, watching what you do, but also understanding the tendencies of these guys that you're starting to play against.
This might not translate to Denny specifically because he's not nearly as quick or explosive a player as you were, but for someone like you, Larry, like who was a good, aggressive defender when you wanted to be and could force steals and things like that. Is it just sort of like a back of your mind thing when like when to shoot the gap and play a passing lane? Like how do you kind of find the sweet spot between forcing a turnover but not being like overly aggressive? Or is it time and score kind of dictates that? Like how do you make that decision?
Yeah, I think all of that plays into a time and score, the mentality of the player, and just really knowing the tendencies of offensive players. I had this thing, and obviously having a good defensive game plan or having guys that want to play that are going to support you behind you, because if you go for a steal and you don't get it and your guy goes back door, you have to have the confidence in your teammate that you didn't just put our whole situation at a disadvantage by you shooting the gap, going for the steal. So there's rotation. So having confidence in your teammates that they have your back in that way. But when I think about like tendencies, when I was playing, I would watch a lot of film, and watch guys that were right-handed players. And the game is different, right? You had a lot of go to the wing and swing back to the top of the key. So it was a different sort of game, a different sort of spacing. But what I figured out is if I force the guy right, or if my teammate forced the guy to his right hand and he gets to the wing, and most times we had that swing pass to the top to get it to the weak side, I knew kind of the rhythm or kind of what it takes for that right-handed player to make that pass back to his left to the top of the key. And even if I wasn't guarding the top of the key guy, I knew the amount of time that it took for the guy to pick the basketball up and turn his shoulders to now skip the ball or swing the ball to the top of the key. So that's my timing. Mm-hmm. If my teammate's guarding the ball, I'm watching him, and as soon as he picks it up, I'm just sliding over, getting ready to go, because I know, like, it's crazy. We're getting like real deep into it now.
This is good. People will love this, I promise.
It's like, the body mechanics of someone. I mean, how your body moves, to pass the ball right or left, or to move back or forth. Your body, it's body movement. So I would just kind of time up when that guy picked the basketball up and how much time it took for his shoulders to turn to swing the basketball. And while his shoulders were turning, then I was shooting the gap. But I only got that because I watched film and I knew what plays that they had when they would dribble to the wing to swing to go now and play on the weak side. So that is all of the stuff that goes in, and you have to have enough film in your background to compute all of that within 15 seconds? 18 seconds at the most when all of that stuff is happening. So that's my thing about watching film, and why we watch film is to be a step ahead of the game versus trying to figure out what the next move is.
That's awesome. I promise people will really be into understanding that kind of next level of detail and nuance there. It seems like that would still take a certain amount of trial and error, though. Like, even if you understand it, like, that seems like something the more you do it, you'll get better at. And that we've seen this kind of jump from him in just like one, he didn't even play a full season last year, nor has he played a full season this year. And like, it's a noticeably better product. As the last Wizard to make a first team all defense, do you see that kind of potential in Denny longer term? Like, people are already asking about it for this year, which I think is crazy, because you have to have the reputation and the narrative to go with it. But do you see him kind of trending in that direction where he could get that kind of notoriety like longer term?
Yeah, I think that different stats will have to add up to that. I had steals that added up to me, the being noticed that I play defense. So a lot of guys have, defensive rebounds, a bunch of defensive rebounds. Obviously, they play their position, and now they're able to finish the play by getting the defensive rebound. So if you have a bunch of rebounds and you play defense, that's something that adds to your stat. So I think with him, it's going to be guarding multiple positions, because the game is now a small game. So I think that he'll get, attention. You'll get, that added piece when you're able to guard multiple positions and also rebound the basketball. I don't see Denny as a high steals guy, but I see him with the ability to switch, guard on the perimeter, but also guard, inside of the paint for those guys that are rolling. And then if he can rebound his position well, getting 7, 8, 9, 10 rebounds, then, you get talked about, being one of those players that are, on the scouting report for your defensive abilities. And that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to make teams like change up their calls, or, if they called it 1 down when they played everybody else, it was 2 up when they played us, because I watched so much film and I would figure out what 1 down was. So that's, the other stuff that goes into, making those sort of teams, is to really be an agitator within those other locker rooms.
And to your point, those rebounds are starting to trend in the right direction for him. He had 11 last night, which is his career high. He had 10 the game before it. It's the first time in his career he's had back-to-back double-digit rebounding games. So it just, like sometimes people talk about rebounds like, oh, okay, maybe there's some empty rebounds. I don't buy it. Like, to me, ending a possession is almost as important as like the initial challenge or contest. Like, just not giving people second chance opportunities, I think is another great thing that he can bring to the table for them.
Well, this is a scoring league, and everybody is a skilled basketball player. So the faster you can rebound the basketball, the faster you can get down on the offensive end to put pressure on the defense. So I would say that, rebound the basketball and being able to push the ball is, that's what winning teams do.
We talked a lot last season about pace, and then the pace they played at, how it kind of created, how it threw off their floor balance and how that hurt them defensively. And Wes Unseld, I think, seems to agree with that line of thinking, because he's emphasized efficiency over pace. They've held like half of their opponents at least under 100 points this season, which they have not done, I don't know, since Randy Whitman was, the coach of the Wizards, I think. So that seems to be an intentional choice by Coach Unseld to like make them be in better spots and be more solid and be more efficient. Have you liked what you've seen from them in that direction so far?
Well, yeah, because I think we all understand it's a copycat league. Like, one team does something, the other team is going to do it. One team runs this set, the other team is going to do it, because obviously these guys are very skilled players. But I think you have to do it different. You have to figure out what's going to work for you. It may not be sexy all the time, like for the fan base or for the, for the TV coverage, as far as, like you said, scoring, 130 points. But you have to find out what works for you. And San Antonio did it that way for years. Obviously, they did have the quote unquote big three, but they didn't play the style of basketball that, just one pass and a screen roll and then, that's it. Yeah. So they did it different, and when I was coming in, they did it different. So if you're an organization and, you want to win games, or you want to be, the top, you have to figure out what works for you. And I think if you don't have, the quote unquote big three style of play, I think you figure out the best style. And I like this style because it gives them better floor balance. You take the emphasis off of Brad, just to do it all, score it all, be it all. And you give other guys an opportunity to be successful. And when other guys get an opportunity to be successful on the offensive end, where they're touching the ball, we're getting some cuts, we're getting some movement, those guys are going to perform for you on the defensive end. They're going to get back. They're going to run back because they just touched the basketball, and the basketball gives you energy. So from that standpoint, I love what the Wizards are doing, with the game, because I think that they should try to do it different and not try to equal up, with what the league is doing. Like, league stats are good when you're 1 or 2 up there. That means, league stats are good. But, if you're down, in those stats, but you're winning basketball games, then those things mean absolutely nothing.
Or if you're trying to play some other team's style of play, but, they're first in the league at it and you're 15th. Well, maybe you don't have the people for that. To your point, Brad has 5 straight games of 7+ assists. I think he's never had more than 6 straight games. So we'll see what he does tonight. But he looks more interested in creating for other guys and things like that. But he has not been sort of the Brad we expect offensively. Is there anything in particular you've noticed from him, Larry, that's like off about his game, or something he's doing or not doing? Is this adjusting to the new rules? Is it adjusting to new teammates, the ball? Like, what would you attribute his kind of slow offensive start to?
I think it's just an adjustment, an adjustment just from, not just this year, but last year, and the year before, just figuring out what he needs to do for his team and for him to be successful, right? I mean, you talk about the All-NBA, you talk about All-Star, you talk about, all of the free agent stuff. Like, you can get out of whack. Like you can get out of, out of sorts a bit of just as far as to how you're going to execute and what it's going to take to actually win basketball games. Then we bring in that leadership, from top to bottom, and you're being held accountable for the style of play, for, missed rotations, for bad shots, things of that nature. I think it makes you a better player. And I think Brad will become a better player, even down the road, because now he has an understanding of, it doesn't necessarily have to be all about, what Brad does. Brad is a huge piece of that team and allows everyone else to kind of be themselves. But for him, I wouldn't be worried, too much about, his productivity. But I would say that you have to factor in, again, his equipment that he's using is a little bit different. And the team that he's on is a little bit different. But he's a guy that, if you go into the other locker room and you look on their scouting report or you look on their board before the game, he's all through it. And as long as he stays that guy, he'll allow his teammates to be more successful as well. So I'm not concerned. Obviously, you want Brad to play well and be the All-NBA player that he is, but those guys are winning basketball games. And, if we got to sacrifice something, we have to sacrifice a little bit of our game to be, that team that's playing at the end of the year is worth it.
I love that mindset, the unselfishness. But the other thing I really enjoyed, and Kyle Kuzma said this multiple times after wins, you can't play with your food. I think that's like a thing the Wizards have been guilty of maybe more than any team in the league the last several years of like, okay, we're coming in, we're playing the last place team in our division or even the conference. And, we lose a game late. Like obviously they lost to Charlotte, but you played a above 500 team at home after a win streak. Like you were kind of, not due for a loss, but like that one's not a bad loss to me. But for the most part, they've won the games they have to win. And I feel like that's what good teams do, right? Like they do what they have to, and you win a few against the better teams, but like that's what this team needs to be solid about is just, and you talked about earlier, like when you're playing a team that's down 2 or 3 starters, like taking advantage of that and actually following through. Is that something just like a coach can bring in and change overnight, Larry, or is that personnel? Like how have they been able to like flip that switch in the last year?
I think it's all included, man. I think it's all included. I think it's it's a fine line in the NBA between winning and losing games. I mean, it's a really thin line of like a 2, 3, 4 minute stretch here and there in each game that could possibly, result in, in a win or a loss. So I think that you have to have, the support of your front office. You have to have the support of the coaching staff to know that we're all on the same page and you're going to support the players. Because every player that goes out there, they want to play better than they did, that night. I mean, so you have to make sure that they're engaged, they're prepared, because we all want to be great. But it takes players being put into a system, being put into a structure that's going to allow like the best to come out of them. Like Kuzma's strengths is someone else's weakness and vice versa. So you start to play off of the different guys, from a personnel standpoint of who's actually on the team and how they work on the court as a unit. And then how do they communicate off the court? Because that in turns, makes them better on the court. So it has to be a good combination of guys that are, similar, guys that bring a little bit of edge, guys that mix up the pot. So I think that's, a job, by the general manager as well, is to bring in those guys that, fit the mold or fit the pieces and you start to create that combination that you need. And personnel is you got to have the players. Like you got to have the players.
It's not college where the system or the scheme can really rise you above the competition on a season long level. Like you said, you got to have guys, and it just seems like even a training camp and 13 games is probably not enough time to fully work out how all those pieces fit. So that they've looked this good already, I'm optimistic because I think that that's only going to get better. Does that seem fair to you?
Man, you know what? I watch this team and I look at the personnel, and obviously you have to, think about, injuries and just things that happen just throughout the course of the NBA season. But you look at a team that shouldn't lose 3 games in a row.
Yeah.
So if you look at a team that shouldn't lose 3 games in a row, there's some win streaks there. That tends to be a pretty good season at the end of it if you think about, your ability not to lose 3 games in a row. You lose those 2 games and your mentality to play that next game is that of a crazed dog. If that's your mentality about not losing 3 in a row. And sometimes it's going to take a scuffle, or sometimes it's going to take a real battle to get into, as far as your team goes, it lets you know that, hey, we're in it for the long run. And I think if that's the mentality of those guys of, hey, we're not going to lose 3 in a row this entire season. And we're going to live with those results at the end. And it's not a 1-year deal. Like we're building on something, and want to see where you guys are at the end of this year with that sort of mentality. Then that tells us how we, move to the next box.
Yeah, I think that's huge. The fact that like Tommy Shepard is not done dealing and trying to make moves and keep improving on this. And this is a core. Hopefully you can build around longer term. Obviously, going to make some choices in the offseason between Harrell and Bryant and things like that. But Larry, the Vegas line on this team was like the over-under was 34.5. I said 41 and 41 before the season. Obviously, we didn't get a chance to talk about this on air beforehand, but we basically nailed the wins total last season. So I'm going to put you on the spot here again. You don't have to give me like a number, but is this a 50-win team? Is this a 40-win team when it's all said and done? Like, where do you kind of see them sort of leveling out after 82 games? Like,
Right. You know what? Right now I have them, I think in the high 40s. Okay. I think that they are above a 500 team, and I believe that they're a playoff team. And I don't necessarily believe that they're a play-in team.
There you go. I love it.
Yeah, I think that they have enough, talent, and I think that they have enough direction as far as the Eastern Conference goes to really be there. So I have them, above 500. Like you said, I don't have to give you a number, but I do have them in the playoffs, and I have them, making the playoffs solid.
That's great. I think that's what everybody wants to hear. You let the rest kind of shake out, and depends on other teams and stuff like that. Obviously, one of the teams they'll be competing for playoff seed and things like that, the Miami Heat. They play them tonight at 7:30, and again on Saturday at 7 p.m. Tonight's in Miami. The next one's at home. To me, that's huge. Like, you got to win one of those two against a team like that. Miami's 10-5 right now. The Wizards are 11-4. What do you see from that matchup? Does it suit the Wizards, I guess?
Well, I think, that's a good matchup. And I think that's a team that they'll be having their eyes on, throughout the year on the standings, whether they're one above them or one below them. I think that Miami team is a really good team. I think, I see more of a talent unit with the Wizards. So I think if you're talking about, those back-to-back games like that, I think a lot of times talent wins over. So if you're talking about a split, I think I would be comfortable saying, hey, you guys, you're going to get one of these, try to get 2. Sure. And that's the mindset, because this is a team that you're going to see, one above you or one below you for the entire season. And when you talk about that sort of process, then, hey, you go into the playoffs, so we might as well start to get prepared now and send those messages, going into the playoffs, that you're going to be a team to be reckoned with. So it starts now.
I love that. So they have 2 games in a row against the Heat. They play the Hornets again, then the Pelicans again, and then the Thunder. Like, that's a pretty good stretch of games for them afterwards. So I think, maybe not another 5-game win streak, but again, if we talked about this breaking the season into chunks, can you go 3-2, 4-1, things like that? I think this is a pretty good stretch for them to be able to do that. Larry, as we wrap up here, any other things that we haven't talked about this team that you've noticed or want to throw out that people might find interesting or just any observations, I guess?
No, I think it's just difference of situations when you bring different players in, and obviously this is a traveling league, so many players play in many different teams and different organizations. And this is the old thing is one man's trash is another man's treasure. And that's what I was thinking when you think about, Montrez and Kuzma, and those guys, and even the slack that KCP got, when he was over with the Lakers, and how, when you bring guys in that have something to prove or, don't like the comments that were made about them in their last situation, how much a different situation can benefit them, but also can benefit from them. So that's really what I see is like, obviously as a guy that played, for a number of teams, you always want to take a look at the situation that players are in to really get a good gauge on who those players are, how that player, affects the basketball game or affects the team. So I think it's really good that those guys that came from the West Coast get a chance to come now on the East Coast and have a really good record, thus far, and really proving themselves on the East Coast and in the Wizards uniform. So just shout out to those guys who I know put in a lot of work and a lot of time. And sometimes different situations, you don't get the credit that you always deserve or the credit that you're looking for. So just shout out to those guys who keep working, and shout out my guy, Tommy Shepard, for, all the years of hard work and I, it's paying off for him. I've already sent the congratulations text to him. And that's a guy, man, I send a text no matter what time. He's always a guy that's going to respond. So he's a really solid guy. So I want to send a shout out to T Shep and his family as well.
19 years with the organization. I want to say 28 in the league overall, which is kind of crazy to think about. But you mentioned those guys coming from the West Coast coming here. I seem to remember the last time the Wizards had a couple of guys come from a West Coast team. There was Hughes, Arenas, Jameson. Those names might ring a couple of bells for people. Actually, even Caron Butler came from the Lakers too. So we got a pretty good track record of taking some West Coast players and having some success with them. So I hope that's the case. Larry, we have gotten a couple questions. Hey, where's Larry been? I told everybody, you got some really cool things happening on a personal level, on a business level. Anything you got going on that you want to tell folks about that they might kind of find interesting? I know you got some cool stuff on the academy front that people might want to hear about a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'm really into the business of basketball, and I'm in the business of basketball to help promote, young people into reaching their goals, not only on the court, but off the court. So what I've been doing, over these last 5 years, 6 years, is to creating a system that help operates basketball academies. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to introduce those programs to, really anyone that's in the youth space, to make sure that we're operating in best practices and giving the young people the best chance to be successful. So those programs have allowed me to build, character development programs where it's not just about basketball. It's about how you react in your classrooms, how you interact in your community, and then also how, your abilities on the court to, give yourself confidence or, create adversity or things of that nature. So I've been heavily focused in, really getting the word out and getting the message out that we're taking this thing across the country. We're right now in Winston-Salem with CP3 working with his academy, and Sacramento working with Bobby Jackson and his academy, and a number of other NBA players that we're working with to really create best practices to give the knowledge that we have, back to the youth. So it's taken up an awful lot of my time. My son is a up and coming basketball player, is a senior this year. So I vow to not miss one thing that goes on, during his senior basketball season because of the pandemic and all of the stuff that's going on, just being really present in everything that he has going on. So that, there's just not enough time in the day, but I appreciate Matt, and I appreciate the Believe in Wizards, team. And I will be around. I'm not retiring from the podcast. Just be a matter of the timing, making sure that I'll stay away as long as the Wizards are winning. But yeah, that's what I'm really up to now. And it's a joy for me. And I appreciate, all the support.
as much as, people are invested in their teams and stuff like that, I think what you got going on there is just a tad bit more important. So I totally respect that choice. And, we'll check in with you, throughout the season here when we got some good stuff to talk about and get your thoughts. And people, again, if you have questions for Larry and stuff like that, please continue to send those in. We'll get those to him, and we'll kind of put a list together, and we'll get some insider insight into what the player perspective would be for a lot of these things. As always, this has been Believe in Wizards. Rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. Continue to check us out. We've been building and building over the season here, so I think this is trending in the right direction. A good team is always more fun to listen to people talk about. So hopefully they'll stay good, and we can keep bringing people what they want to hear. Larry, thanks as always. Good luck with everything, and we'll catch you soon.
My man, appreciate it, Matt.